the Rhine is one of the most famous rivers in the world. It's flowed through the history of this continent. Drying up seems like a pretty seismic event.
It's not only one of the most famous rivers in Europe, it's also one of the most important rivers in Europe. I would also say internationally, it's absolutely vital for Germany's economy. There's a lot, really a lot, that goes through the river Rhine, and the fact that levels are now so low is a very big problem, not only for the ecosystem around the Rhine, but also for Germany's economy. There are fears that if this situation continues, if barges cannot travel through the river Rhine, that could have a really big impact on Germany's growth forecast for this year. Now, the big problem is what comes next. Authorities simply cannot change the situation immediately, but what they can do is try and find alternatives. And one of the alternatives that is being discussed right now is whether some of those shipments should be stopped and instead they should use rail, for example, to transport things as important as coal, for example, which is normally something that travels along the River Rhine.
And coal, I think, is probably the most important point here when we're looking at the global energy market. Of course, all countries are really struggling with less gas than before. I suppose if the coal can't get to the power stations in Germany, Germany will be using more gas from elsewhere. Potentially, this will push up the prices for everyone else as well.
Well, prices are already going up, especially for the things that are transported through the River Rhine. That's something that's already clearly visible. But coal, as you mentioned, does play a very important role in Germany's current political and economic situation, because coal was being now specifically used as an alternative to Russian gas flowing less and less towards Germany. And that's why German authorities were trying to use alternative sources, including coal. If coal, as you say, cannot be transported as easily as they hoped, then that could also bring even more economic problems to Germany. That's also why among the discussions that are being led by authorities is a possibility to make coal transport via trains a priority. In other words, to find the specific slots so that if barges cannot take the coal through the River Rhine because water levels are very low, that can be done with trains as a very much important priority here in the country.
Now, this is, of course, all in the context of the German political consensus over the last decade or so being closing down nuclear power stations. Now, I understand that the government might have made a sort of half U-turn on this now, potentially extending the life of some of these power stations, but the Greens, who are in government, are still implacably opposed to nuclear power. Is the consensus shifting now, given the really serious energy situation?
It is shifting, especially among the German population. Many people in favor of really keeping those power plants open, especially under the current difficult economic situation, energy situation. It is still, however, not completely decided whether the government will complete that U-turn. You mentioned correctly that there are divisions among Germany's governing coalition when it comes to nuclear power plants. Some, as the Greens, have been opposed to using those power plants, but other members of the German coalition think otherwise. There will be a decision coming soon. That's something that the German Chancellor stressed himself this week, after there's a stress test which can deliver some concrete results as to whether those nuclear power plants would actually have a concrete impact on Germany's overall energy situation. So the U-turn is, let's say, being made. It's being discussed, but it hasn't been completely decided.